This Sabbath, I add more to our series entitled Covert CIA Evangelists. Study 50.7. The acronym CIA makes a left-handed allusion to the U.S. government's own covert agency. Though both seek to control the events of the globe, a major difference is that Christ's covert celestial intelligentsia has existed throughout Earth's history with a different mission: to win human salvation. Remember, we learned in Psalms 103 that Christ has allowed a special selection of humans to sidestep the grave by transforming them into eternal spirits. We proved this heretofore hidden miracle that, imagine if you can, beforehand they were flesh and blood, men and women, until the day of their transformation, until the day when they were given the veiled cloak of cherubims and seraphims. Then these earthly agents became secret operatives for Christ that were based in his special pavilion in heaven on the red cloud of Jupiter. In Revelation 19, we learn that they are now depicted to be Christ's army, saints garbed in white robes. Today, May 4th, 2024, this Sabbath afternoon, we will continue to study Revelation 19. This follow-up study is entitled Vesture Dipped in Blood, Part 2. Several points from Revelation 19, verse 11 through 16, that could not be thoroughly unfolded in 50.6 can now become details of our focus. We begin by clarifying the sharp sword out of Christ's mouth and his use of it to smite the nations. Historically, students could not resist the impulse to give a literal construction of this symbolic expression. I remind you what we have learned already. The Lord's vesture was, before his return, already stained with blood. To personally slay more people while riding on a white horse would stain the horse also, and thusly nullify the symbolism of a white horse. Additionally, he, Christ, has an army who follow him dressed in white. So we must ask, is it not the duty of an army to slay the enemies of their general? Let us reread the text to affirm these points. And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood. And his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod, with a what? And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. Revelation in chapter 19, verses 11 through 16. The first symbolism to be unraveled is John's declaration that he saw heaven open. Let us ponder. Since there has never been a time when we could not gaze upwards to see heaven, we can wisely conclude that its opening day is not to be construed as literal, but figurative. It points us to the day when we would uncover Christ's heretofore hidden battle base on the red cloud of Jupiter, the station from whence he commands his agents. The mustard seed advent is the first to expose this day. Thus, the day of its reference is now. Deeper understanding shows that exposure to doctrinal light denotes the magnitude of this heaven opening day. Like Adam and Eve, we play hide and seek with Christ to veil our nakedness. Like creatures under rocks, when it is removed and their nest is uncovered, so goes their security. The rocks of our concealment are our churches. They give a cover to our false doctrines. But today's media removes all hiding places. Like the camera that exposed the tyranny of the Minneapolis police on George Floyd. Remember how, like exposed rats, they too fled in all directions, seeking shelter. Such is the case with the truth of God's word. It is the sword of his mouth. Paul said, "For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit. And it is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart." Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. Sensitive to our insecurity, 2,000 years ago, Christ hit upon Jesus and spoke his word. Thusly did he meet his covenant to never speak directly to Israel. And now today, through antitypical David, the plain meaning of his word is given, making real the expression, the heavens are open. The Proverbs are no longer a mystery. Proof positive of this, he said, "These things have I spoken unto you in proverb, but the time cometh when I shall no more speak unto you in proverbs, but I shall show you plainly of the Father." John chapter 16, verses 24 and 25. Ironically, even with the shield of Jesus, sinners, like as at Sinai, are still jolted when lambasted by the truth, the sharp sword of the Lord's mouth. It's like the first bold move of a man's approach on a woman of his masturbatory fantasies. This is the straight testimony here. Her benumbing and vociferous rejection, like a sword, conveys being cut deep. All men know the feeling. It is the same that hypocrites now feel. And Isaiah chapter 11 says more. He gives perfect companion to Revelation chapter 19. Two key symbols of his work I highlight. The first one, the son promised to David's father Jesse, who grows out of the earth. He is called the branch. The second symbol is different. He is personified, not as the branch, but as the root of Jesse. The slashing truth that spurns our entrenched Christian fantasies comes not from the root, but from the branch. And since Jesus lays claim to be the root of David, see the reference below, he cannot be the branch because it grows out of the root. The branch is promised to do that which Jesus did not do. He, with the rod of his mouth, humiliates the wicked. Jesus is in time fantasizing suitors. Let's read. "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And he shall be of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked." Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. The branch, not the root, grows, it says grows, to smite the nations. Jesus, after Calvary, claimed the gift of all power. Thus he had no need to afterwards thusly grow in power or might. Jesus then is not the branch. The wicked are instead smitten by the denunciatory words, the rod, that the Spirit places not in the root but in the branch's mouth. Such is the same as the sword in the Lord's mouth, since both make reference to a rod and since both smite the nations. Ergo, our example. The woman denounces the amorous passion of the smug suitors. The rod is this vocalized message. There has been no other Bible message called the rod except the shepherd's rod message that was sent to and rejected by the Seventh-day Adventist Church after 1955. Micah 6 affirms, quote, "The Lord's voice crieth unto the city, and the man of wisdom shall see thy name. Hear ye the rod, and who hath appointed it?" Micah chapter 6, verse 9. Isaiah 11 and Revelation 19 are companion texts. I tell you, both speak of the day when the earth, through a single orator, will be enlightened by God's word. The sword and the rod both depict the testimony of Jesus made clear as uttered not by Christ, neither by Jesus, but by the prophet like unto Moses. He who is to make plain to humanity the themes of Jesus' 2,000-year-old Proverbs. It then becomes an immutable fact that the branch is here identified to be a Christianized Jew, one that at first is hidden or underground until he buds today at the end of Jesus' Gentile ministry. Since we are told in Revelation 19 that out of Christ's mouth goeth a sharp sword, and such is proven to be an audible and global vociferation of his word, then of a certainty it speaks of enlightenment by David. It could be no other way, since Christ is not a covenant breaker. He is thereby self-constrained to never again directly deploy his voice unless so done by the prophet like unto Moses. Isaiah tells us even more. He speaks more in the time when he, the branch, grows out of Christianity. Before so noting, I give you a sidebar. By Paul's insistence, we study the first principles of the oracles of God, found in Genesis. And on the opposite pages of the Bible, we reinforce those themes from Revelation, making it the last oracles. But if you open the Bible to Isaiah, you can see that it is squarely located smack dab in the middle. Excuse my colloquialism. No wonder he is called the gospel prophet. He reveals the time epoch when the rod comes onto the scene. He says, "So shall they fear the name of the Lord from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him." Today, when the enemy floods Congress with the goal of insurrection, not Christ, neither Jesus, but the Spirit of the Lord strikes back with the branch, the Lord's very mouthpiece. Continuing to read, "So shall they fear the name of the Lord from the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him. And the Redeemer," Christ on his white horse and his army, "and the Redeemer shall come to Zion, and unto them that turn from transgression in Jacob, saith the Lord. As for me, this is my covenant with them, saith the Lord. My spirit that is upon thee, and my words which I have put in thy mouth, shall not depart out of thy mouth, saith the Lord, from henceforth and forever. Isaiah chapter 59, verses 19 through 21. The January 6, 2021 MAGA insurrection is the reference point in the time of this text. It is the isolated day now at hand when the enemy floods the U.S. Congress. It inaugurates the day of the sword of the Lord's mouth, the coming of the army of the Lord that exposes the hidden rats. As stated, Christ has finished his mission of human abortion. The horrors of bloodshed are no longer to be ascribed to him. Full comprehension of this point can only resonate in the minds of Christians who understand that Christ is not Jesus, nor is he the Father. Therefore, all who are still Constantinian Christians, that is, men who speak and think and understand as a child, will be lost in the gravity of this point. But the wise will know the significance of the assignment of blood. Ezekiel 33 has been quoted throughout my ministry. In it, we are told that all men of leadership in the Sabbath-keeping churches who fail to warn their flock when the mustard seed trumpet is blasted, they, by concealing the severity of its warning and rejecting the validity of its Bible-based resolutions, are proven to be not saints as they claim, but men who offer to Lucifer the shed blood of their children and their flocks. True indeed is the Bible pronouncement, ye have done worse than your fathers. And another point now resonates. Before the entire universe, Christ is to be exonerated. He is made to be blame-free. This by the finding of the mustard seed advent. The true witness for Christ. In affirmation, Christ said, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. There is another that beareth witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnesseth of me is true. John chapter 5, verses 31 through 32. This author proves that no attribution for human blood can legally be pinned to Christ. He gave warning with the sword of his mouth by the branch of Jesse. Such was all that the covenant required of him, so that now the elders who, by pride of heart, repudiate his voice, they become culpable to absorb the onus for the oncoming bloodshed. He gave allusion to this in Ezekiel, and I quote, when I say unto the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die, if thou dost not speak to warn the wicked from his way. His blood will I require at thine hand. Therefore, O thou son of man, say unto them, as I live, saith the Lord, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but that the wicked turn from his way and live. Turn ye from your evil ways, for why will ye die, O house of Israel? Ezekiel chapter 33, verses 8 through 11. Such leaders repeat the history of ancient Israel. As shown in study 50.6, they learned the way of the child-sacrificing masons of ancient Canaan. How so? If they were to accede to the Lord's still small voice back then, it would come with a price that is unbearable to them. The confession of their false theological shelter, that under which they hide. Instead, they choose to mute the Lord's trumpet to cover their rear ends. In this way, they are defined as giving a child sacrifice. The blood of their flock will stain their vestures. The Lord's covert CIA will do the slaughtering by the work of a new player. Jacob's obedient brother, Esau, and his cohorts. Did we not presume that Christ discarded Esau as useless? How naive. Now is the day when the duty of Esau, Jacob's twin brother, is explained. As a son of Abraham, God did not eternally disinherit him and his iconic ethics. It is clear to now see that his seed, the Islamic world, bears the brunt of his mission. The pre-qualifiers are stark. They inhabit the desert. They live not by the rain, but their territory is watered by the dew of heaven. And they control much of the world's oil, that which is called the fat of the earth. That we may now see his fingerprint, Paul recommended to us the magnifying glass, the first oracles of God. And all legit teachers will hear the words from Isaac, the father of Jacob and Esau. In the book of Genesis, it says, and Esau said, is not he rightly named Jacob? For he hath supplanted me. And he said, hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, behold, I have made him thy Lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac his father said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Genesis chapter 27, verses 36 through 40. It was shown that Israel, even in justice, did not have the will to shed the blood of their evil neighbors. Remember what we quoted in our last study when David said, they did not destroy the nations concerning whom the Lord commanded them, but learned their works. Yea, they sacrificed their sons and their daughters unto devils, and shed innocent blood, even the blood of their sons and of their daughters, whom they sacrificed unto the idols of Canaan. And the land was polluted with blood. Therefore the Lord abhorred his own inheritance. Psalms 106, verses 34 through 40. Killing people to preserve life was not Israel's thing, wasn't his talent. But Esau lives by the sword. He is crazed by it. So only when he becomes converted to Christ, mind you, everyone taken to Christ's holy pavilion is converted to Jesus. And this storehouse, these past 42 years, has converted them to Christ. Then upon conversion, they receive their white garments, and some their white horses. Then they will see what Christ saw, the full extent of the evil of child-sacrificing criminals of the world. Consider the conversion of Nebuchadnezzar, king of ancient Babylon. He perfectly met Isaac's description of Esau's inheritance. Nebuchadnezzar came from an oil-rich desert nation, Iraq. And he definitely, go back and read his work, ruled by the sword. In fact, he commissioned all the false prophets of his day be slain. Only the merciful Daniel stepped in to protect them. Back to Genesis. Before Isaac gave the above blessing to Esau, Now we read his first utterances or blessings given to Jacob. He said, now he's speaking to Jacob, not Esau. Let people serve thee, Jacob, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Genesis chapter 27, verse 29. Accordingly, all of Abraham's seed will bow to Jacob's descendant, the branch, even Edom. Edom is Esau's nickname. The book of Amos helps to develop the point. It reads, in that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof. And I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom. So we see here now a parleyance between David and Jacob. The two are synonymous of each other. That they may possess the remnant of Edom, and of all the heathen which are called by my name, saith the Lord that doeth this. Amos chapter 9, verses 11 through 12. Quote, all heathens called by my name, close quote. This noun phrase makes reference to Gentile Christians. And the Islamic nations are herein described as Edom. All from each that shall be saved will serve David. This includes the anciently raptured kings. The promise, let thy mother's sons bow down to thee, equally applies to them. These past 2,400 years, Nebuchadnezzar was among that raptured group. As one of Rebekah's obedient sons to bow to Jacob, not even a resurrection is required for him to fulfill this commission. Amazing indeed how the script has been flipped. The Bible shows 2,500 years ago, Jacob's seed, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and all of the other captive Jews bowed in service to Nebuchadnezzar. This makes true Isaac's promise to Esau. He said, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Esau was given dominion over Jacob under Nebuchadnezzar's rule. Up until that point, Israel or Judah controlled the land of Edom. To give you a little bit of Bible history that we don't have the opportunity to touch on now. Still, Nebuchadnezzar on a white horse in Christ's army? The thought is unfathomable. That is, until you consider his pledge to honor Christ by his sword. He hated phony Masons and vowed to kill them. Thus, like Christ, he too hated wickedness. That's not enough, though. The hatred of wickedness is only half of the heart's work on the trail of salvation. It has a non-identical twin. Esau must learn to love righteousness. In the testimony of Jesus, Christ declared his passion. It was not to kill sinners, it was to transform them by the light of Israel. For 2,400 years, then, Nebuchadnezzar's mission was to learn to love righteousness. Learn by the testimony of Jesus. Not given in proverb, but made plain. Christ said, I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. He that rejecteth me and receiveth not my word hath one that judgeth him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. The Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment, what I should say. Whatsoever the Father saith unto me, so I speak. John chapter 12, verses 49 through 50. His words then are the sword of his mouth. Do you see that connection? It was the then yet to be declared testimony of Jesus. Therefore, Nebuchadnezzar needed the works of David's fountain pen, he who is the fairest of the children of men. Such prefigures the transference of meat in due season from the storehouse to the Lord's house. Otherwise, Nebuchadnezzar would be a victim of the manipulations of Masons, the very thing that caused his original rage. Remember, they conned him to even sacrifice the 3 Hebrew boys. Daniel chapter 3 says as much, and I quote, "Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language," did you get the full scope of that? "That every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against Christ shall be cut in pieces. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, whose works are truth, and his ways judgment. And those that walk in pride he is able to abase." Daniel chapter 3, verses 28, 29, and 37. As shown in study 50.6, all who condemn abortion violate Nebuchadnezzar's avowal. They speak a word against Christ. Remember, his vesture is dipped in blood. To slay such men of duplicity who also advocate white supremacy requires the authority of Jacob, he whom Christ promised to have Adamic dominion over all the creeps of the earth. The very authority given in this very series. But there's more champions of Esau. Let us not limit it to Nebuchadnezzar. We can't cite them all. But Esau has more from his lineage that will ride in Christ's army. Ezekiel defined 6 of them, 6 men with slaughtering weapons who will execute false theologians. Ezekiel 9 says, "Behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And the Lord said, Go through the midst of the city, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that decry the abominations done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said, Go ye after him through the city and smite. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, even pregnant women. But come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. For they say, The Lord seeth not. And as for me also," maybe we should have a drum roll for this. "And as for me also, mine eye shall not spare, neither will I have pity, but I will recompense their way upon their head." Ezekiel 9, verses 1 through 6, and verse 9 and 10. Recompense the death of the slain, not upon Christ, but upon their own heads, their leaders, manifesting their responsibility for the death of their own flocks. Such recompense comes by the true witness, according to John 5, now appearing on your screen. This slaughter, for reasons expressed profusely in prior work, shall afflict not all religions, but only the highest one, Zion. They are the city. They are the professedly lawful Sabbath keepers. Will they humble themselves to protect their flock? Or will they instead silence the trumpet blast to protect their pride? This is the question of their test. Nebuchadnezzar wants to know. Remember his avowal to slay the proud. In affirmation, I cite to you the work of E.G. White and a snippet of her comments on the slaughter of Ezekiel 9. She says, and I quote, "In the time when his wrath shall go forth in judgments, these followers of Christ will be distinguished from the rest of the world. They lament because pride and deception of almost every kind are in the church. The servants of Satan triumph. God is dishonored. The truth is made of none effect. The Lord commissions his messengers, the men with the slaughtering weapons in their hands. Go ye after him through the city and smite. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house." Ellen G. White, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 210 and 211. Esau shall wield the Lord's sword, including Prophet Muhammad, who will be among the white horse riding garrison of the Lord's army. What pre-qualifier is on his resume? You wonder. Like Nebuchadnezzar, he too came from a desert-rich oil land. And he too enforced his religion with the sword. Yet the parallels to Esau's inheritance are even more stark. Islam teaches that he was raptured to heaven, and they shan't any longer be ridiculed for this faith. The mustard seed, not the Quran, gives the Bible evidence, but it will not boost Islamic pride, I pre-warn you. To the contrary, if they were vexed by the work of Salman Rushdie's book, they will be stunned even more by my sword of holy findings. The Bible shows that all who were taken to heaven were converted to Jesus, meaning they all sang a new song. It says, "And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the elders stood a lamb as it had been slain. And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou, Jesus, was slain, and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and hast made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth." Revelation chapter 5, verses 9 through 10. Wisdom affirms that Prophet Muhammad was inspired by Gabriel. You ask, how so when the Islamic world rejects Christianity? We have a challenge here to our theology. The theme of Kobayashi Maru is not merely vain Star Trekian banter. There are resolutions to no-win riddles. The mustard seed, the captain of God's starship enterprise, can pierce through this conundrum to decipher the reality of this new coalition. Before the answer, I give another brief sidebar, that of King Herod. He was also thought to be an Edomite. He had an obscene zeal to kill Christ, yielding the slaughter of thousands of Jewish babies. Though we can all rejoicefully anticipate the resurrection of those slain babies, Father, in the text on your screen below, expresses his rage in this matter. Herod will be raised to feel the stroke of Enochian wrath. But Islam and Christianity united? How? This prophecy demands our deepest thought. To begin, know that yesterday's start does not gauge today's finish. A gloomy dawn often ends with a glorious dusk. After all, Paul's theorem of maturation taught us that the defilement of babies must be mitigated, for they cannot change their own dirty diapers. Gabriel indeed inspired Muhammad. It was the time of their Islamic dawn. To receive the glorious twilight, Esau's seed must be taught by the branch of Jesse. Thusly does Revelation 5 show Muhammad's grand finale, his new song. And can it get deeper? Let us digress to cite another Edomite of the same epic, one who was thought to be a great thinker. His name was also Muhammad al-Khwarizmi, who passed in 850 AD. He was the Einstein of his day, though he wasn't a Jew. A son of the oil-rich desert of Persia, he gave to us the fundamental theorem of algebra. And his work proves the synergy of Jacob and Esau. Kobayashi Maru is made real, I say. David solves the heretofore no-win scenario. As David has done with the genius of the rod message, he also uses the brilliance of Muhammad al-Khwarizmi to teach polynomial theology. The blessed victory by Jacob's light and by Esau's sword. Esau sees the tyranny of masonry done while under the guise of Christianity, and because of his hatred of idolatry, he yearns to serve his twin brother to break the yoke that Confederate Christians have therewith shackled Jerusalem, the sons of America's former slaves, the ones whom Jacob blessed, the 144,000. It is this escape of Jerusalem from their oppressors that cuts the enemies of Jacob like a two-edged sword. One issue with Muhammad is still yet unresolved. Since the Enochians are promised to reign on earth, will Muhammad be given one of Christ's many crowns to so reign? Our answer requires a deeper dimension. Christ will install kingship in every land, but only those Enochians who have gained the highest credentials of mastery of this, and not Gabriel's light, will receive the crown. We simply do not know the full roster available to Christ for such a promotion, nor can we gauge the intensity of love that they may have for David. Remember, even among the heavenly sons of God, the love for righteousness and the hatred for evil had, among the sons of God, algebraic variation. Only Christ shared Father's fervor in this ethic, and it yielded to him his crown. So heartfelt was it to Christ that, if you can imagine, he did what none others would ever be willing to do. He subjugated himself to the gruesome afflictions of Calvary. This shows that Gabriel was an angel of lesser intensity, the perfect substitute teacher for Esau. In Daniel, books 9 through 12, we see Gabriel's incapacity to enlighten. He was commanded by Christ in BC 600 to teach Daniel, and he, Gabriel, failed in that mission. This fact we cite not to offend Gabriel, but to honor Christ. Light for the Islamic world can only come, again, not by Gabriel, but by a man who is the master of the testimony of Jesus. To win a crown, you must love it more so than any others in your land. Christ said, "He that believeth on me, believeth not on me, but on him that sent me. I am come a light into the world, that whosoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness. And he that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words hath one that judgeth him. The word that I have spoken, the same, what? The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. John chapter 12, verse 44 through 48. The world's only light comes by belief in, not Gabriel, and not even by Jesus, but in the prophet like unto Moses, the dove who hid upon Jesus and spoke through Jesus' lips. Christ is the only light in the world to restore man in honor. The words that he has spoken, the same shall judge us, indicating that that is the sword of his mouth. And how can Christianity, these past 2,000 years, deliver us from Adam's curse of death? The 2,000-year span was calculated to culminate in the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Then Christ, not Jesus, was to return on Adam's white horse. The Christian interim motif was to grow the world from childhood to receive the blessing in that day. The ending drama was to defeat Earth's highest evil, the mega confederacy. If you cannot discern, then do as my Jamaican wife, who had formerly, before I married her, had little understanding on these things. Do as she did and read the Constitution of the Confederacy and the abuses of the age of Jim Crowism. Then you will see why E.G. White called it the sin of the darkest eye. Any abuses in your mind, in your teachings, in your lessons of historic Catholicism pale in comparison. Thusly, were all disciples sent to evangelically wage an assault on Rome, the pale horse rider. Earth's history will have then spanned the age of the white horse to the last horseman of the apocalypse. Let's read. It says, quote, "And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to open the seals, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God. And when Jesus opened one of the seals, behold, a white horse, and a crown was given unto him. And when he had opened the fourth seal, behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him." So he wasn't given a crown. "And power was given unto him over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with the sword, and he went forth conquering and to conquer." Revelation chapter 5, verses 9, chapter 6, verse 1, 2, and verse 7 and 8. For this assault, Peter converted 3,000 devout Jews to Christianity, this in one day. Then, true to my calculus, nearly 300,000 Jews in the 3.5 years after Pentecost were likewise converted to evangelize that beast. But there was a downside. To restore the white horse of creation, to win back his crown, we had to pass through the time of trouble. To define the drama, our narrow focus is not on all the four horsemen of the apocalypse, only the last one, the pale horse rider. His reign began just before the birth of Jesus, as evidenced by Joseph's burden to pay taxes to Rome. And it ended 1,500 years later by the advent of Protestantism, perfecting the symbolism of his reign over the fourth part of the earth. For simple math shows that this 1,500 years is 1/4 of Earth's 6,000-year history. But 500 years of Protestant procession since then brings us to this day. Yet, Gentile troublers still persist. The trouble comes not by Rome, but by the Confederacy to restore tyranny using the camouflage of anti-abortion. Lucifer seeks to claim credit for Christianity's monumental evangelical success, that which transformed Romanism, not through white supremacy, but through victory from spiritual paleness, anemia, as achieved by the child maturing age of Protestantism. Accordingly, we now, with the help of the Lord's CIA, decry the mega zeal to reinstall Catholic tyranny. Therefore, Peter's mission today is to compel the saints to put away historic fables or childish things. Sunday Sabbath duplicity is just one example of Roman anemic Christology. During the Dark Ages, the weekly Sabbath was changed from the seventh day to Sunday, the first day, a change that still dominates the Christian diaspora. But limited in cognizance, not even the Protestant church could grasp the dark severity of that change. They could not, that is, until the branch of Jesse blossomed from within the Seventh-day Adventist quadrant of Protestantism. Paul was right. Only when spiritual childhood is banished can we know to choose good over evil. No, not even the experts, the Adventist ministry have discerned the flagrant severity of that commemoration of death and hell. Only this light opens the first oracles to teach that Adam got his victory over anemia to become a living soul. How? His blood became oxygenated by the breath of life. Oxygenation, you do know, is the only cure for anemic paleness. Then he was warned that in the day that thou eatest of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt surely die. Adam's rebellion to that oracle ushered in the first day, the day of death and hell. Worse still, this yielded to Christ the burden of the blood vesture, the commission to manage human life through death. Adam died at age 930, and that age has significance because it meets the full requisite of the same day proverbial pronouncement, a day unworthy of human worship. The fabled doctrine of human gestation is also rooted in pagan Romanism. First, let's examine the Bible's real concept of death. David, the light of Israel, said, and I quote, "Return, O Lord, deliver my soul. For in death there is no remembrance of thee. In the grave who shall give thee thanks?" Psalms chapter 6, verse 4 and 5. Contrary to paganism, death is here proven to be not a transition, but a termination of awareness. Lucifer told Eve the very opposite. He said, man does not die, but becomes a ghost. And Rome's anemia canonized that deception. Anticipated need for child development allowed God to wink then at their fables. But men of stunted growth are locked in that mythology today, to the detriment of good Protestant government. MAGA insists on infusing the Roman notion that life begins at conception. Their Santa Clausian Christology asserts that on the day of conception, God installs a spirit to facilitate human prenatal development. This ploy is used to resist Jesus' clear command that legalizes the right of child abortion. He commanded them that any body part that offends must be removed. Should not all Christians abide by their profession and honor Jesus' word? Instead, MAGA, devoid of any Bible predicate, insists on twisting the Constitution of the United States to deny women this right of divine freedom. In the Dark Ages, Santa Clausian fables ruled the day. Men were not even allowed to read the Bible. Reproductive biology was light years away from any prospect of comprehension, and mysticism prevailed. But just as a tender and growing tumor has no ghost within, neither does an embryo. Fact is, it begins as a one-cell zygote, smaller than dandruff. Sometimes, the morning light finds an opening in my bedroom curtains. In it, I see dust particles floating in it. We now can prove that these particles are expelled human cells. Do any dare laud the MAGA refrain to assert that they also contain spirits from God? Such would give new meaning to the term angel dust. Taking a shower rinses away millions of such cells. 9 months of gestation yields a child with 3 trillion such cells. Only the Bible, not the Dark Age fables, can govern human reproductive rights. Instead, we have mega politicians hooked on angel dust. In closing, we anticipate the next study, 50.8. But before closing this study, 50.7, we have covered a vast array of topics, many of which have been more fully addressed in prior publications. Let us rejoice that the Lord's intercession with his covert CIA evangelist will yield for us the white horse of Adam's original peace. This day is not to be dreaded. It is a great day for the righteous. And all can still gain entry into this ark. It is the day when men are no longer vexed by sickness, death, poverty, and wicked co-conspirators of Lucifer. A day of rest from the pale horse riders of death and hell. The Lord again, in this proverbial 6th day, will cure our anemia with his breath of life, also known as the sword of his mouth. Such will be a dreadful day for the earth's villains, but their power to bring harm will vanish. We need not now discuss all the other Dark Age Gentile corruptions to Bible theology because, simply put, with this disclosure, we have enough to invite all, Protestant, Catholic, Islamic, et al., to enter into our rest without fear of the Lord's sword. For at his return, our death by his hand is over. His vesture has already been dipped in blood. Thusly do we close.